Ohio State QBs have never really had true success in the NFL, but with CJ Stroud entering the league, could this be a shift in what people think about OSU QBs? CJ Stroud would win Rookie of the Year this past season in the NFL and probably had a shot at MVP if not injured for a couple weeks. He had 4,100 yards, 23 TDs, and 5 interceptions. He won his first ever playoff game in a blowout against the Browns, but fell short against the Ravens in the divisional round. He might be the first OSU QB to win a playoff game as a starter, but we'll talk about those other QBs in a second. In college, his sophomore year, he passed for 4,400 yards, 44 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. In that season, he led OSU to the Rose Bowl, where they would win 48-45. His junior year was maybe a slump, but still very good with 3,600 yards, 41 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. He had lost some of his weapons in the previous draft too. He led them to a college football playoff berth and would lose 42-41 to Georgia on a missed field goal. Not to give too much crap to the kicker, it was pretty long, especially for college. This year was still good enough, though, to get him drafted as the highest an OSU QB has ever been with the second overall pick. So Stroud has been good so far, but how about OSU QBs in the past couple years? Justin Fields was just traded from the Bears, and they would draft his replacement in Caleb Williams. Through his first 3 years in the league, he threw for a bit under 7,000 yards and rushed for 2,200. 22,000 would be insane, but he did have a 1,200 yard rushing season on the ground, but that's probably his biggest accomplishment in the NFL so far. He has combined 54 TDs compared to 30 interceptions and 16 fumbles. He didn't work out with his first team, but the Steelers do hope to revive him. Dwayne Haskins was drafted 15th overall to the Redskins in 2019. He was a pretty decorated player in college with a couple awards, and in his first year as a starter, he threw for 4,800 yards, 50 TDs, and 8 interceptions. He only rushed for 108 on the ground, though, but I wouldn't care too much about that. His NFL career was shaky, and he did struggle off the field, too. So he wasn't really given a fair shot in Washington with constant benching, but when he was in, it wasn't too good, so can't quite blame the Redskins on that part. He never really got a shot to get the growing pains out of him, being a young QB who before this only played one full season at the college level. He was cut from Washington late 2020, but the Steelers would give him a shot, but he tragically passed before getting his chance with them. Terrell Pryor is probably the most interesting case. He played QB all of his time with OSU and has won a bowl game with them. He was drafted in the third round by the Raiders in 2011. In 2013, he really had a chance to play for them, but didn't look too good. He threw for 1,700 yards, almost 1,800, but only threw 7 touchdowns. He had 11 interceptions that year too. He was solid running the ball this year, though, with 576 yards. In 2014, he didn't play, but in 2015, he'd make his way back to Ohio, but he would switch to receiver with the Browns. He only had 42 yards, but in 2016, he broke out with 1,007 yards and 4 touchdowns. He wanted to be paid more money to re-sign that offseason, but would end up going to another team. He went to Washington, where he would have 240 yards and 1 TD. He spent this year and most of the rest of his career injured. He would go to the Jets the year after, and then the Bills. Troy Smith and Bobby Hoying are 2 other noticeable guys, but I don't think the narrative on OSU QBs is going to change until another QB out of Ohio does what Stroud did. Field could still help shift the narrative depending on what he does with the Steelers, but I don't think anyone is getting too excited about Ohio State QBs yet.